So my good friend Tight Tommy has just spent the entire day sitting with his hips locked in one position. Sound familiar? When he gets back from work, he makes these unnecessarily loud grunts as he struggles to get out of his car. When his kids and his dogs greet him at the front door, instead of squatting down without a second thought, he has to channel his inner sumo wrestler to make sure that he's not going to hurt anything on the way down. And after his dinner, Tommy still has to face the final challenge of the night. Yes, it's taking his bloody socks off. Forget doing this standing up. Tommy's back and hips are so locked up that even doing this sitting down feels like he's trying to get into some sort of advanced yoga pose. He didn't sign up for a yoga class. So yeah, if you can relate to Tight Tommy or it feels like your hips are heading in that direction, then this video is for you. I'm gonna go over 3 reasons why your hips are still tight and what you can start to do about them. Now, Tommy isn't my real friend, he doesn't exist, but he is a composite of all of my past struggles, all of the struggles that I see in some of the people that come and take the weekly mobility classes and stretch classes that I run at this gym, as well as all of the struggles that my dad is currently facing, which is where that sock story comes from, by the way, and it's also why I have him on my beginner hip mobility program. More on that later. So I know the struggles that you face. I had to go through the process as a stiff adult myself, and I'm confident that these are the 3 biggest reasons holding most people back. The first reason your hips are still tight is because you're not applying progressive overload to your stretches. Progressive overload is just another way of saying make things harder. And the reason why you have to make your stretches harder and more difficult over time is because the body adapts and gets used to whatever we are giving it. This is why if you're in the gym and you stick to the same weight forever, you will never see progress because your body eventually adapts and gets used to the weight you're lifting, and it needs more of a challenge to continue building muscle or getting stronger. So this is a concept brought in from the world of strength training, and we need to also apply it to flexibility. We are creating a change within the body. We're trying to go from point A to point B. And if we keep stretching the exact same way week after week or month after month, then you might see a little bit of progress, but then you're eventually going to stagnate and you're not going to get the results that you're after. So in the gym, progressive overload is pretty simple. You just add more weight. But how do we apply this with mobility training, especially if we're practicing from home? So there are 3 main ways we can make our stretching more challenging. The first way is to spend more time in the stretch. So let's take a butterfly stretch, for example. Instead of just spending 30 seconds here, once our body starts to adapt and get used to the stretch, we can bump that up to 60 seconds. Another way of increasing the amount of time is to do the same stretch multiple times. So instead of just holding once for 30 seconds, you could hold twice for 30 seconds, or you could hold this stretch 3 or 4 times within a single session or a single day. And then the third way to add more time is to increase the frequency at which you train. So you could do this stretch once a week, and once you get used to that, you could try and bump it up to twice a week and see if you start getting better results. So this is a great way to progress, but we eventually hit a ceiling where we can't just keep stretching for longer and longer amounts of time. Otherwise, we'll just be stretching the whole day. And what's the point of that? We need to start bringing intensity into the equation. And the way we can make a stretch more intense is by simply going into a deeper stretch. So going from here to here, which makes a stretch more challenging. It makes it slightly more unbearable. You do want to make sure that it is safe to do this. So you want to make sure that your body is responding positively to going deeper. But it is a good way to start progressing rather than just spending more time. You go deeper. That way, the body comes under more challenge. This is why it can be really good to actually track how deep you're going each session. And you can do this by taking photos of yourself, videos of yourself, you can do this by using blocks and targets that you use to get to the same depth every single time. But again, just like with adding time, there is a ceiling to this. You can't just keep going deeper and deeper every week or even every month for that matter. The body is going to need time to get used to that depth. So what's one more thing that we can do to make our stretches more challenging? The third way to make things more challenging is to get stronger within your stretch. And this is actually the second reason why your hips are still tight. It's because you don't have any strength within your stretch positions. You're not building any strength within your stretch, and this is why your body doesn't actually trust you to go deeper. Let me give you another example. So when you go into a stretch, most people just hold here. They hold and they relax and they breathe. And that can be useful for some situations and sometimes, but when we want to convince our body to allow us to go deeper into a stretch, our body has to feel safe within that stretch. And the only way our body feels safe is if we can demonstrate that within that stretch, we have the strength to either hold ourselves or to push ourselves out of that stretch. The reason why we get a stretch in the first place is because our body recognizes that we're going into a position that we don't have too much control over, or we're going into a position that we haven't been in a while. This stretch is actually called a stretch reflex, and it's what stops us from going deeper because we're like, oh shit, okay, that is my limit. I am not gonna push it because something is gonna hurt. So what we have to do then is we have to strengthen the stretched muscle in order to convince our nervous system that we do have strength there, and over time our body will go, oh, okay, I trust you now. I'll allow you a little bit more depth and a little bit more, and that happens over time. So how do we create this strength then? Well, there are a few different ways, but one of the most simple and effective ways to build strength within your stretch at home is through the use of something called isometric contractions, which is where you are using your muscles without actually moving. This works perfect for stretched positions because it allows us to actually create some strength within the stretch without moving out of the stretch. So it's very easy to do. So for example, in this inner thigh stretch, the way I would create this contraction is by driving my foot into the floor. And you can try this yourself. As you start to drive that foot down, you can begin to start to feel your inner thighs contracting, and that is creating strength. So how do you use this for every other hip stretch that there is? Well, I like to use a method that I like to call the get me out of here method, which is where you think, how would I get myself out of this stretch using the muscles that are being stretched? So in the case of this inner thigh stretch, the way that you would get out of it would be to just bring your foot back in. So doing the opposite of how you would get into the stretch. The same applies for the butterfly stretch. To get out of the stretch, I would drive my knees up out of that stretch. The same goes for this frog stretch. I would get out of the stretch by driving my knees together. The same goes for this hamstring stretch. I would get out of the stretch by driving my leg down into the floor. The same goes for this glute stretch. I would get out of the stretch by driving my legs outside of the stretch. And so whatever stretch you're in, you want to make sure that you're actually staying still and not moving, but you're trying to leave the stretch. And you trying to leave the stretch, for example, you trying to drive your knees up and out of that stretch, is going to then contract the muscles that are being stretched, which is going to build that strength and that confidence that your body needs to feel safe to go deeper. Now, going back to the first point of making things more challenging, the way that you can progressively overload these contractions is by simply contracting with more effort. So at the start, your hips might actually be quite weak, and you might only be able to contract at around 10 or 20% effort. But over time, as your body gets stronger and stronger, you're going to be able to contract with more and more effort. So you might start off at 10%, but in a few months or a few years' time, you'll be able to contract your muscles at 80 to 100% effort, which is going to allow them to go deeper into positions and stretches. Now, I do want to warn you, you don't want to overdo these contractions. I've gone full force with contractions before when my body just wasn't ready for it because I was impatient and I wanted to see results straight away. So just make sure that you're listening to your body and your hips when you are contracting to make sure that they feel safe. If you want me to guide you through how to exactly do the contractions for each hip stretch that you need, then you can check out my beginner hip mobility program. It's linked down below. It's going to give you everything you need to improve your hips as a stiff adult trying to practice from home. The third reason why yours and why so many other people's hips are still so tight is because you are failing to strengthen your shortened side. Every stretch that we go into has two sides. We have a lengthened side, which is where you feel that stretch, and then opposite to that, you have the shortened side. And the shortened side is what is actually responsible for pulling us into a deeper stretch. So the stronger your muscles are on the shortened side of a stretch, the more effective you're going to be at pulling yourself into more depth over time. So for this inner thigh stretch, one way that we could strengthen the shortened side would be to lift the leg as high as we can, holding that for a few seconds, coming down, and then repeating that for 3 to 5 cycles. We can apply this to any hip stretch. So for example, in this hip flexor stretch, the lengthened side are the hip flexors, the shortened side are the glutes. So we can simply place ourselves in a position that allows us to lift up into that shortened position. One more example would be the hamstrings. The hamstrings are the lengthened side in this stretched position. The shortened side would be the hip flexors because they're on the opposite side. So the way we could strengthen this would be to simply move out of that stretch slightly and then to try and lift up into that shortened position. If you do this, you'll feel that really strong hip flexor stretch. Sorry, that really strong hip flexor contraction. And again, going back to that first point of progressively making things more challenging, the way we can make our shortened side work more challenging is by either spending more time within those shortened positions. So instead of holding for 3 to 5 seconds, I could hold for 5 to 10. I could also do this for more cycles. So instead of doing this 3 to 5 times, I could do this 5 to 10 times. I could do this more times within a week. And I could also get my shortened side stronger by using some weight. If I place 1 to 2 kilos over the outside of my ankle, that becomes much more challenging. So as you can see, there are so many options and variations that we can use to progressively overload. Now, I kind of feel bad. I know that this can be a lot of new information and it can be very hard to apply this on your own, but that is why in my next YouTube video that I'm currently working on, I'm going to show you exactly how to stretch and then strengthen your shortened side for every area of your hips so you can be confident in knowing that you won't leave any stones unturned. So look out for that one. I'll put the link in the description once I have uploaded it, but if you don't want to wait for that and you just want to get straight to work on your hip mobility using the techniques that I have discussed in this video, then you can check out my beginner hip mobility program, which is linked down below as well. It's a 4-week program. You can do it from home and it's going to give you everything you need, every stretch, every variation, every strengthening exercise. All you'll have to do is click play and follow along with me. So it's super easy, and I'll also be inside of that program answering any questions if you have any. If you don't want to end up like Tight Tommy, this one's for you. Thank you for watching. I hope you got some value out of this video, and I will see you in the next one.